So I would say some of the real highlights of my career here at the University of Michigan have been certainly my students here in the School for Environment and Sustainability. I came here as a fairly young professor. I had taught for a couple years at Virginia before coming here, but here's where I really learned a lot about teaching and interacting with students. And I'd say from day one I really had great students here that challenged and pushed me in ways that I probably needed to be pushed, but taught me a lot about teaching, taught me a lot about myself, and hopefully in the process I taught them a little bit too. I always saw teaching as kind of a dialogue between the class and myself and the environment in terms of the ideas we were able to explore together. So that was clearly a highlight. And then I'd say the other thing is that the opportunity I had starting back in 1999 to direct the Arboretum and then eventually the Botanical Gardens, that for a landscape architect like myself, being able to teach design, but also being able to practice and implement it at sites like the Botanical Gardens and Arboretum was really a perfect mix of things for me. And so being able to help those two sites develop as laboratories for students and the community to really engage have been really the ideal career for me, I think, at the university. I've always had several key interests in landscape architecture. As I was in practice before going back to grad school, so my initial job was in a firm in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was just pretty much conventional landscape architecture practice. And I got pretty much bored after several months. And then a job opened up to work in Pennsylvania with what at that time was the Historic American Engineering Record, which was documenting the historic Lehigh Canal Trail in eastern Pennsylvania. And I'd always had this fervent love of history. And so it wasn't unusual to me at all to be drawn to wanting to preserve historic landscapes. And so this project in eastern Pennsylvania was very much working with community groups there to try to preserve this industrial canal landscape that was in the back door of their communities. Those were the kind of projects that really stirred my imagination. But I also had some projects where I could do some ecological restoration and trying to restore prairies or woodlands that had become disturbed. And so I found that those two parts of landscape architecture were things that I really enjoyed. And then certainly when I went into academia, those two themes really extended throughout my career. During the years I was teaching at University of Virginia, there was a position that came open here, and I didn't have a PhD, and the position description said that they really preferred a PhD. And so I didn't think much about it, just didn't think that it was a good fit. And one of my colleagues who was teaching urban plannings, who had studied here at the University of Michigan, he kept saying, that School of Natural Resources, that's a perfect fit for you. I really think you should apply for this position. And he just kept badgering me so much that I eventually did put in my application. So my relationship with Nichols Arboretum started really the day I came here for, I'm not sure if it was the day I came for an interview or if it was the day that I came and met with the dean after I was hired and came here to start. But Jim Crowfoot, who was dean at the time, I mentioned that I had an interest in prairies. And so he said, well, we've got a prairie over at Nichols Arboretum. You should go check it out. That, it might be a place that you'd enjoy working. And so I did, and Harry Morton, who was a professor here, but the director of the Arboretum at that time, was very open to me giving him advice on how to manage this landscape. At that time, what they would do is let the grass grow during the summer and then mow it every fall. And usually they would burn out several belts on their tractor each year as they were mowing. And I kept saying, well, why aren't we burning this? That this would be much better ecologically if we were burning these grasses. And so he allowed me to set up a research project where we were comparing mowing versus burning, and eventually we set up a burning program for the entire field. And so from that, I don't know, just enjoyed. So it became both something that I just really enjoyed personally, as well allowing me to do some quantitative research around the impacts of fire on the landscape. There's been a consistency through the years of students really being passionate about the environment, wanting to learn, especially hands-on learning. So like I know that a number of the students I've taught over the years have felt that, being able to participate in prescribed prairie burns at the Arboretum, for instance, those kinds of hands-on things have been very memorable for them. And it's been great for me to be able to help provide some of those kinds of experiences for them in terms of learning. I was concerned about invasive species that were taking over parts of the Arboretum, and so began to organize volunteer work days for community members or students to come out and work on that. And then when Harry decided to retire, which was around 1999, he suggested to the provost that I would make a good director of the Arboretum. And so that's how I got involved at the Arboretum Botanic Gardens long term. And it has been a really wonderful opportunity to have both that and my teaching career here. So as I retire, I'll retire from both jobs, so I won't really have any official capacity at the Botanic Gardens or here in terms of academics, but I'm hoping that there may be some room for me to volunteer and to continue some involvement, as long as I'll try to make sure that I'm not impacting whoever comes in to follow me as director there. I don't want it to affect their freedom to move forward. One of the things that I found as director of the Arboretum and the Botanic Gardens is that I felt we've always been most successful when we seek out collaborators and sort of open ourselves up for new opportunities. And so I think if you talk to a lot of my colleagues, they'll note that frequently people would come to me with ideas that they'd like to do, an art performance, an art exhibition, some sort of installation, and some of them have been surprised that I just said yes, but I always saw a great advantage to doing those kinds of things. And so some years back, I don't know exactly where it exactly started, but there was a group of students looking to create a campus farm, and they came to me with an idea initially for a master's project that they wanted to create a University of Michigan sustainable foods program. And I offered to be the advisor as a team of 4 students. And there were 2 main goals in the project. One was specifically to create a campus farm, and the other was to encourage the food systems on campus, the dining services, to purchase more local food and to incorporate sustainability principles in the dining. So eventually we were able to secure funding from the provost's office for a farm manager. We hired a SNRE alum, Jeremy Matthaei, who still has that role. And the campus farm is still run by students, and they provide the leadership, and we provide the background support to help it continue to go. So that's been really a wonderful marriage. As an outgrowth of that, a couple of years, my colleague Joe Trumpy from the School of Art and Design, who's been teaching courses in green construction, approached us with the idea of building a straw bale structure. He had just built one up at the biostation and wanted to build one here on campus as a demonstration of a green building built by students. And so we explored opportunities, decided that it would be useful if it was done in conjunction with the campus farm. And so several years back, it was built during May by a group of students, and now serves as a really effective meeting place for students at the campus farm and for some community events as well. So that's been a real win-win situation. And to me, it always comes back to just being open to possibilities and sort of, the possibilities that partnerships can bring in terms of enriching your place and your resources you've got. I think landscape architecture has a very important and critical future ahead of it, particularly in the face of a changing climate, that our cities, our communities, our landscape at large are facing tremendous pressures, and that as a profession, landscape architects hold a variety of skills that can put them in a leadership role in helping to shape that future and to help communities be more resilient, to create livable spaces, restore some ecological integrity to the landscape, and just help us adjust to the kinds of changes that are moving forward. And I think the community engagement skills that we encourage here for our students in landscape architecture too are also very important. We want communities that are just and equitable, and that won't happen unless everybody has a seat at the table. And so it's really important that we find a way to integrate all these themes as we plan for the future, to create really livable, dynamic communities where people are excited to live. And I think landscape architects bring that unique set of coordinating skills, understanding of ecological design, which is clearly one of the foci of our program here, to be a catalyst in helping really think a new future for many of our communities across the country and across the world. So what's my next chapter? Well, that's a good question. And I don't know that I can answer that I know for sure what it is, but it's kind of exciting. You're at a threshold of something new. I know I'm not just going to sit back on my haunches. There's a part of me that definitely wants to work with organizations for future change and to continue to work for a better world in some way. And most of that starts locally, so I'm sure a lot of things I do will be at least have some local grounding. And I look forward to being able to work on things where there's much more freedom to really help make good things happen. And and I know from the groups I'm already involved with in the community that they would welcome some additional help. So I look forward to that. But I also look forward to doing it on my own terms and being able to do continued writing and research work. I haven't touched a power lawnmower in probably, I would say at least 40, 50 years almost. My neighbors weren't sure when I told them I was going to put a prairie in my front yard. I think they definitely liked the idea as a landscape architect, and they were a bit trusting in that regard, but they weren't quite sure as they started to see these tall grasses come up in the front yard. But gradually they got used to it, and it didn't hurt that my yard was on a series of garden tours and that people would sometimes come by bus and get off and look in my yard, that it gave a little more credibility. Well, I guess the only other thing I'd say is that now that I've been at the University of Michigan nearly 34 years, this has really become my home, and it's clearly longer than I lived where I grew up or any other place, and so at least for the near-term future, my wife and I figure that we'll stay here in Ann Arbor, and I have always felt very honored and proud to have been able to teach here at the University of Michigan, and look forward to really continuing some involvement as I go into my retirement career, whatever that holds.